The fluorescent lights of the hospital hummed, a constant, irritating drone that mirrored the anxiety buzzing in Ben's chest. He sat on the hard plastic chair, the cold seeping through his thin jeans. His daughter, Lily, was inside, somewhere behind those double doors, undergoing surgery. A surgery that felt like it was tearing him apart piece by piece. Ben was a single dad. It hadn't always been that way, but life had a funny way of changing plans. He worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, juggling shifts at the diner and a late-night cleaning gig at the office building downtown. Every penny went to Lily, dance classes, school trips, the endless supply of art supplies she always needed. Now all that seemed insignificant. A freak accident at the park, a loose swing, a misplaced step, and Lily was rushed to the emergency room. He'd watched the ambulance doors close, a wave of helplessness washing over him. He should have been there, watching her closer. He should have. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the images. The doctors were optimistic, but surgery was surgery. And the waiting was unbearable. His story, was just beginning, and he hoped with all his heart that it would have a happy ending. Before Lily, Ben's life was simple, predictable. After his wife left, though, everything changed. Suddenly, he was mom and dad, teacher and playmate, all rolled into one sleep-deprived package. He remembered the first time he braided Lily's hair, a tangled mess of knots and tears, ending with lopsided pigtails. But Lily had beamed, declaring him the best hair braider ever. He'd learned to cook, mostly from watching YouTube videos. His first attempt at lasagna resulted in a burnt offering that even the dog wouldn't touch. But he persevered, driven by Lily's constant requests for Daddy's special spaghetti. Balancing work and Lily was a constant struggle. He'd race from the diner, smelling of greasy burgers, to pick her up from school. He'd help her with homework, his mind still buzzing with orders and prices. Some nights he barely slept, catching a few hours of rest before starting all over again. The guilt gnawed at him. Was he doing enough? Was he giving Lily the life she deserved? He missed bedtime stories more often than he liked to admit. He sometimes felt like he was failing her, that she deserved better. That feeling was worse now, looking at the closed operating room doors, wondering if he could have prevented this, if he had just been a better dad. The waiting room was a study in muted colors and hushed whispers. Pale green walls, worn beige carpet, and rows of identical plastic chairs offered little comfort. A flickering television in the corner played a daytime talk show, the cheerful banter a jarring contrast to the somber atmosphere. A young couple sat huddled together, their faces etched with worry. An elderly woman nervously clutched a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. A businessman paced back and forth, talking loudly on his phone, oblivious to the distress around him. The air was thick with unspoken anxieties, a collective weight of fear and uncertainty. The scent of antiseptic hung heavy, a constant reminder of the sterile environment and the fragility of life. Ben felt isolated in the crowded room. He tried to distract himself by reading a magazine, but the words blurred on the page. He glanced at the clock every few minutes, each tick of the second hand an agonizing reminder of the time Lily was spending in surgery. He wished he could be with her, holding her hand, telling her everything would be all right. But all he could do was wait, trapped in this sterile, silent prison of worry. He felt utterly, heartbreakingly alone. He tried to be strong. For Lily, he had to be strong. But the weight of it all, the worry, the guilt, the sheer exhaustion was crushing him. He hadn't allowed himself to truly feel it, to acknowledge the fear that had been clawing at him since the accident. He had to be practical, make arrangements, talk to doctors. There wasn't time for tears. But now, sitting in that sterile waiting room, surrounded by strangers and the constant hum of machines, the dam finally broke. It started as a silent tremor, a trembling in his hands. Then, a lump formed in his throat, choking him. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway, hot and stinging, tracing paths down his cheeks. He lowered his head, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He didn't want anyone to see him like this, broken and vulnerable. He was supposed to be the strong one, the protector. But in that moment, he was just a scared, exhausted father, desperately hoping his little girl would be okay. The tears flowed freely now, a release of all the pent-up emotions he had been holding inside. A shadow fell across Ben. He didn't look up, assuming it was a nurse or a doctor, someone who would offer a perfunctory, "Everything will be all right," before hurrying on to the next patient. But then, a soft voice broke through his despair. "Excuse me," the voice said gently. "Are you all right?" Ben flinched, pulling his hands away from his face. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen, and saw a woman standing before him. She was older, perhaps in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple, elegant dress and a pair of pearl earrings. But it was her eyes that struck him. They were filled with warmth and compassion. She wasn't like the other people in the waiting room, who seemed to be doing their best to ignore his distress. She looked genuinely concerned. I'm fine," Ben mumbled, his voice thick with emotion. He knew he wasn't fooling anyone. The woman offered a small, sympathetic smile. "I don't think so," she said softly. "Sometimes, we all need a little help." She extended a hand, offering him a tissue. "My name is Eleanor." Ben hesitantly took the tissue. "Thank you," he mumbled, wiping his eyes. He felt foolish, exposing his vulnerability to a complete stranger. Eleanor sat down in the chair next to him, maintaining a respectful distance. "It's all right to be upset," she said, her voice gentle and reassuring. "Hospitals can be very frightening places." She paused, allowing him a moment to compose himself. "I know what it's like to sit in a waiting room, feeling helpless and alone." Ben looked at her, a question in his eyes. He wondered what brought her to the hospital. Was she waiting for a loved one, too? "My husband," Eleanor began, her voice softening. "He was ill for a long time. I spent many days and nights in hospitals, waiting and hoping." A shadow crossed her face, a fleeting glimpse of sadness. "It's not easy," Ben admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "My daughter, she's having surgery." "I understand," Eleanor said, her eyes filled with empathy. "Sometimes, just having someone to talk to can make all the difference." She offered him a warm smile. "And I'm a very good listener." Ben hesitated. Opening up to a stranger felt strange, almost inappropriate. He was a private person, used to dealing with his problems on his own. But there was something about Eleanor, something genuine and kind, that made him want to trust her. It was an accident," he began, his voice cracking. "At the park. She was on the swings and—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The image of Lily lying on the ground, her face pale and lifeless, flashed before his eyes. Eleanor gently placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right," she said softly. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." But Ben needed to talk. He needed to voice the fears that were consuming him. "I should have been watching her closer," he confessed, his voice filled with self-reproach. "If I had just been paying attention." "Accidents happen," Eleanor said gently. "Sometimes, no matter how careful we are, things still go wrong. Don't blame yourself, Ben." Her words were like a balm to his wounded soul. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control of his emotions. Maybe, just maybe, talking to Eleanor would help him get through this. "It's not just the accident," Ben continued, the words tumbling out now, a dam finally breaking. "It's everything. The bills, the work, trying to be both parents. I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is." He hesitated, feeling a flush of shame. He hadn't meant to burden Eleanor with his problems. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I shouldn't be dumping all this on you." Eleanor squeezed his arm gently. "Don't be silly," she said. "Sometimes it helps to share the load. And I suspect you're carrying quite a heavy one." Ben sighed. Lily's dance classes, her art supplies, they all add up. And now, with the hospital bills. He shook his head, despair creeping back into his voice. "I don't know how I'm going to manage." He confessed to her about his 2 jobs, the constant struggle to make ends meet, the fear that he was failing Lily. He told her about the sacrifices he had made, the things he had given up, all for his daughter. And as he spoke, a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel quite so alone. Eleanor listened patiently, her eyes filled with understanding. When Ben finished, she took a deep breath and said, "I understand more than you know, Ben." She paused, her gaze drifting to some distant memory. "My husband, Arthur, was a wonderful man. We had a long and happy life together. But he was ill for many years before he passed." She explained how Arthur's illness had taken a toll on her, both emotionally and financially. She had spent countless hours in hospitals, just like Ben, waiting and praying. She knew the fear, the uncertainty, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. "Losing Arthur was the hardest thing I've ever had to face," she continued, her voice thick with emotion. "But I learned that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, and that sometimes the greatest strength comes from allowing yourself to be vulnerable." She looked at Ben, her eyes filled with compassion. "You're not alone, Ben, and you're stronger than you think." Her story showed Ben that he wasn't the only one who had struggled, and that even in the face of immense loss, hope could still exist. Ben looked at Eleanor, a newfound respect in his eyes. He had initially seen her as just a kind stranger, but now he realized she was a survivor, someone who had faced immense loss and come out on the other side. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for sharing your story with me." A small smile touched Eleanor's lips. "We all have stories, Ben, and sometimes sharing them is the best way to heal." They sat in silence for a few moments, a comfortable silence filled with understanding and empathy. Ben felt a connection forming between them, a bond forged in shared experiences of loss and hardship. He realized that Eleanor wasn't just offering him a shoulder to cry on. She was offering him something much more valuable, a sense of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, light could still be found. He started to see Eleanor not just as a stranger, but as a friend, someone who understood his pain and offered him a glimmer of hope in the midst of his despair. The sterile waiting room suddenly felt a little less cold, a little less lonely. As the hours ticked by, Ben and Eleanor continued to talk. They discovered they had more in common than they initially thought. They both loved old movies, enjoyed gardening, and believed in the power of kindness. Eleanor learned about Lily's love for art and her dreams of becoming a dancer. Ben discovered that Eleanor had been a teacher before her husband's illness, dedicating her life to helping children learn and grow. When Ben mentioned his struggle to find reliable childcare, Eleanor offered a solution. "I have a wonderful neighbor, Mrs. Gable," she said. "She's a retired teacher and adores children. I'm sure she'd be happy to help out." Ben was overwhelmed by her generosity. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "You've already done so much." Eleanor smiled. "Nonsense," she said. "We all need a little help sometimes. And I have a feeling Mrs. Gable would enjoy spending time with Lily." She then casually mentioned that she might be able to look into some programs that could help with Lily's medical expenses. Ben was floored. This woman, a complete stranger just hours ago, was already becoming a lifeline. Finally, a doctor emerged from behind the double doors, a weary but reassuring smile on his face. "Mr. Miller," he called out. Ben shot to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. Eleanor stood beside him, offering a supportive hand. "Lily is doing well," the doctor announced. "The surgery was a success. She's still under observation, but she's stable and resting comfortably." Relief washed over Ben in a tidal wave. He felt his knees weaken and he almost stumbled, but Eleanor steadied him. Tears streamed down his face, this time tears of joy and gratitude. "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Not just yet," the doctor replied. "She needs to rest, but you can see her in the morning. She'll be groggy, but she'll be happy to see you." Ben nodded, unable to speak. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. Thank you for everything. Eleanor squeezed his hand. It's going to be all right, Ben, she said softly. You and Lily are going to be just fine. The worst was over. Lily was going to recover. A new chapter was beginning. The next morning, Ben was at Lily's bedside before the sun had even fully risen. Lily was still pale and weak, but her eyes fluttered open when she heard his voice. Daddy? She whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm here, sweetheart, Ben said, his voice thick with emotion. He gently stroked her hair. Everything's going to be all right. Lily's recovery was slow but steady. She spent several days in the hospital, undergoing physical therapy and regaining her strength. Ben was by her side every step of the way, reading her stories, playing games, and simply holding her hand. Eleanor visited them every day, bringing flowers, books, and small gifts for Lily. She quickly became a familiar and welcome presence in their lives. Mrs. Gable, Eleanor's neighbor, also came to visit, instantly charming Lily with her warm smile and gentle nature. With Eleanor's support and Mrs. Gable's help, Ben was able to return to work, knowing that Lily was in good hands. The financial burden was also easing, thanks to Eleanor's discreet but generous assistance. Slowly, life was returning to normal, but it was a new normal, one filled with gratitude and hope. The hospital was no longer a place of fear, but a place where kindness had bloomed. As Lily recovered, Ben and Eleanor's friendship deepened. Eleanor wasn't just someone who visited them at the hospital. She became a part of their lives. She'd pick up Lily from school when Ben was working late, take them to the park on weekends, and even teach Lily how to bake her famous apple pie. Lily adored Eleanor. She called her Grandma Eleanor, even though Eleanor wasn't her grandmother. Eleanor didn't mind. She loved Lily like her own grandchild. Ben found himself looking forward to Eleanor's visits. He enjoyed her company, her wisdom, and her unwavering support. They would spend hours talking, sharing stories, and laughing together. He learned about her life, her travels, and her passion for helping others. He started to see Eleanor as more than just a friend. He admired her strength, her kindness, and her generous spirit. He was grateful for everything she had done for him and Lily. She had come into their lives at a time when they needed her the most, and she had transformed their world. He wondered how he could ever repay her. It was becoming clear that their bond was something special, something that transcended mere friendship. One sunny afternoon, Eleanor invited Ben and Lily to her home for tea. Ben had always known that Eleanor was comfortable, but he was unprepared for the sheer scale of her wealth. Her house was a sprawling mansion nestled on a hill overlooking the city, surrounded by manicured gardens and a sparkling pool. Lily gasped as they drove up the long driveway. "Wow, Grandma Eleanor, you live in a castle," she exclaimed. Eleanor chuckled. "It's just a house, dear," she said modestly. "But you're welcome here anytime." Inside, the house was filled with priceless artwork, antique furniture, and luxurious decorations. Ben felt a little out of place, dressed in his worn jeans and t-shirt. He couldn't imagine how someone with so much could be so down-to-earth and kind. Later, while Lily was playing in the garden, Ben stumbled upon a framed newspaper article in Eleanor's study. The headline read, "Eleanor Harding donates millions to Children's Hospital." He scanned the article, learning about Eleanor's late husband, a successful businessman, and her extensive philanthropic work. Suddenly clicked. Eleanor wasn't just comfortable. She was incredibly wealthy. A billionaire, in fact. Ben felt a wave of mixed emotions: shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of unease. How could someone so wealthy be so genuinely kind and compassionate? He had met wealthy people before, but they were usually aloof and self-absorbed. Eleanor was different. He found Eleanor in the garden, tending to her roses. He hesitated, unsure of what to say. "Eleanor," he began, his voice tentative. I saw the article." Eleanor looked up, a knowing smile on her face. "Ah," she said. "You know my little secret now." Ben didn't know what to say. I don't understand," he stammered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Eleanor shrugged. "It's not important," she said. "What matters is that we're friends. My wealth doesn't change who I am, Ben. It doesn't change how I feel about you and Lily." He looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of pretense. He found none. She was the same Eleanor he had met in the hospital waiting room. Kind, compassionate, and genuine. Her wealth didn't define her. Her character did. He realized that her generosity wasn't about the money. It was about the size of her heart. "Eleanor," Ben said, his voice filled with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. You've changed our lives. You've given us hope when we had none." He struggled to find the right words to express his gratitude. "You came into our lives at the darkest moment, and you brought light with you. You've helped Lily in ways I can't even begin to describe. And you've been a friend to me when I needed one the most." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget what you've done for us, Eleanor. You're an amazing woman." He then confessed that he was worried about how he could ever repay her. He felt indebted, but Eleanor quickly brushed aside his concerns. "Your friendship is all the repayment I need, Ben," she said sincerely. "Seeing you and Lily happy is the greatest reward I could ask for." She explained that helping them had given her a renewed sense of purpose and joy, something she had been missing since Arthur's death. She was finally using her resources to make a tangible difference in the world. The following months were filled with laughter, joy, and a growing sense of family. Eleanor continued to be a constant presence in Ben and Lily's lives, attending Lily's dance recitals, helping with homework, and sharing her wisdom and experience. Ben, in turn, became Eleanor's confidant and companion. He listened to her stories about Arthur, helped her with her garden, and provided her with the companionship she had been missing since her husband's death. They found solace in each other's company, creating an unconventional but loving family. Lily blossomed under Eleanor's care and guidance, excelling in her studies and pursuing her passion for dance. Ben, with Eleanor's support, was able to provide a stable and loving home for his daughter. One evening, as they sat on Eleanor's porch, watching the sunset, Lily snuggled between them. "I love you both," she said, her voice filled with contentment. Ben and Eleanor exchanged a warm smile. They had found something special, something unexpected. In the most unlikely of places, a hospital waiting room. Their lives had been forever changed, and they were grateful for every moment. They were a family. Years passed. Lily continued to excel in dance, eventually earning a scholarship to a prestigious ballet academy. Ben, with Eleanor's encouragement, pursued his own dreams, taking night classes and eventually landing a better-paying job. Eleanor remained their constant source of support and love. She attended every dance performance, celebrated every birthday, and offered wise counsel whenever they faced challenges. Their bond grew stronger with each passing year. They were more than just friends. They were family. They celebrated holidays together, traveled the world, and shared countless memories. One Christmas, Lily surprised Eleanor with a handmade gift, a painting of the three of them, standing together in Eleanor's garden. It was a simple gift, but it spoke volumes about the love and gratitude they felt for her. As Lily grew older, she understood more and more the depth of Eleanor's generosity and the impact she had had on their lives. She saw Eleanor not just as a loving figure, but as a role model, someone who had taught her the importance of kindness, compassion, and giving back to the world. They were a family, created not by blood, but by choice and by love. Lily did make a full recovery. She danced her heart out. Ben worked hard at his new job. He made sure Lily got everything she needed and wanted. And he never forgot Eleanor's kindness. One day, Ben asked Eleanor if she would like to officially be part of their family. He asked if she would consider being Lily's guardian if anything ever happened to him. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She said yes without hesitation. She loved Ben and Lily with all her heart. They were a family not by blood, but by love. A single dad, a little girl, and a billionaire widow. An unlikely family, but a family nonetheless. They had found each other in the most unexpected of places, and they were grateful for every moment they had together. They all learned that family could be found anywhere. The hospital waiting room brought them together and made them a family. It all started with a simple act of kindness. It all started when Ben cried alone, and Eleanor offered a shoulder. The end. But not really. Their lives continued, filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. Lily grew up to be a kind and compassionate young woman, always ready to help others in need. Ben continued to work hard and provide for his family, never forgetting the lessons he had learned about the importance of kindness and gratitude. And Eleanor continued to be their guiding light, their source of wisdom and support. Their story is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can be found, that even the most unlikely of people can come together to create something beautiful. That family isn't always about blood. It's about love, compassion, and connection. It is a story about a single dad who cried alone. It is a story about a billionaire widow who offered a shoulder. But most of all, it is a story about the power of human connection to heal, to transform, and to create a family where it was least expected. It is a story about the good in the world. And it is a story that shows how one small act of kindness can change everything.